Welcome to Brick by Brick, Building Wealth Through Homeownership. I am Kim Von Dohren, your realtor.
And I'm your banker, Ed Marko. So here's the big topic.
Most popular.
It is by far. How does credit work? What's a credit score? Why does my number go up and down? All those kind of things. What's it all about? Can you even control it?
Mm-hmm.
And you can.
Yeah. I think, first I should say this. I did work as a credit educator and a credit counselor for 4 years in my vast history. And so I literally used to teach this topic. And I know you, of course, as a lender, credit score is one of the primary things that you use to determine eligibility for getting a loan.
Absolutely. And I actually still do teach from time to time a class exactly on how credit works so that people can manipulate their credit score to get the best rate that they could possibly get when they're buying a home or financing anything for that matter.
Right. So we're both pretty well versed on this subject.
I would like to think that we're both about as expert as you can get to be on how credit works.
Right.
So here goes. I mean, I think you had a great idea. Let's just talk broadly first about what it's about.
Right. I always used to, in my class when I would teach it, I always used to call it a game. It's a game. Imagine credit scores and your credit is a game. Now, somebody else designed the game.
Right.
And they made up all the rules. And all you can do is understand the game well enough so that you can play to win. And winning basically means that you utilize the game, the system they created, so that you can maintain the highest score possible so that you get all the advantages of a high score in all those moments in your life when you encounter that need.
That's an excellent analogy. That's the best analogies I've ever heard. It is a game, and there's times you want to play the game hard and rough. And there's other times that you can just sit on the bench and watch because it doesn't really matter at that time in your life.
Right.
But understanding the rules, that's important. So there's 3 major credit reporting agencies out there. The big 3. There's other ones, but there's really only 3 as far as most lenders are concerned. You've got Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. Later on, we're going to talk about how you get in touch with these people or how to dispute things. But right now, I'm going to give you a phone number. This is a phone number that you can call to get in touch with any of these 3 reporting agencies. That phone number is 877-322-8228. One more time, 877-322-8228. Contact that number. You have to be provided free credit reports so you know where you stand. The other way to find out where you stand, there's a bunch of these companies out there. The one that I favor the most is Credit Karma. You just go to creditkarma.com, sign up, and you can look at live your credit report every day if you want to from 2 out of the 3 reporting agencies.
Consumers, though, have the right to get a copy of their credit report for free once a year from all 3 of them. And the easiest way to get that is through the website, annualcreditreport.com.
Exactly. So now we've got that out of the way.
Yep.
So very briefly, I'm going to talk about how this number is come up with. So
you're going to talk about proprietary information, Ed?
It's not proprietary. You can find this on Google. It's just, you got to dig pretty hard and deep to find it. So Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion all use credit scoring models, and there are several of them. So all 3 of these agencies may use one model when they're giving a bank a credit report for a mortgage. That will yield 1 score. They will use another model when they're giving a car dealership a score for a car loan, and that will yield a different number. The number that you're going to look at most often when you look on your Credit Karma or you get your free Equifax, TransUnion, or Experian credit report from them is going to be the score that they use for credit card companies, and that's going to give you a different number.
Wait.
Go ahead.
As a consumer,
Mhm.
I think most people believe
Mhm.
that when they pull up their credit score, say
Mhm.
on Credit Karma or wherever, that that's their credit score. That it's the same one you're going to see, Ed, as my mortgage lender when I apply for my mortgage.
But it's not. That's the exact point that I'm trying to get to, is when you're looking at your score online, you're going to most likely you're looking at your credit card score. You might score an 840 or a 720 or a 680, whatever it is, doesn't matter. When I pull the credit score as a mortgage lender, they're going to use the hardest model there is. And it could be 40, 60 points lower for the mortgage model than it is for the credit card model. And your TransUnion is going to be different than your Experian, than is different than your Equifax,
Right. Because they
because
have their own models.
they have their own models. So you might have a 680 on Equifax, a 720 on Experian, and 675 on TransUnion. The bank, when you're doing a mortgage, we're going to pull all three and we're going to use the middle score. So when you're going to get a mortgage, you want to make sure that all three of your credit reports are as large a number as possible. They're all unlocked and the bank can get a hold of them. Because if we can't get all three, we're not doing anything with you. We
Right.
want all three.
Do you find that consumers are surprised when they reach out to you and you pull their credit and it's a different number than what they've been seeing?
Yeah, virtually no one understands how credit scores work. It's not nothing they teach you in school. It's not readily available out there. One of the things that I do like about Credit Karma is if when you look at your score, to the right and to the left and on the bottom and on the top, there's all these little places that you can click, and it's all there to teach you how credit works. You can learn all of this. Most of the information that we're going to hear about today is gleaned off of there just because they're so good at keeping it in an order that is digestible. And we want to try to keep this in an order that's digestible.
So would you suggest to people that when they see that their credit score is 700, that they now wait till their credit score is 740 to reach out to you?
Well, I wouldn't wait. I would listen to the rest of this podcast so you can learn how to affect that change rapidly.
Okay.
Because there are a lot of things that you can do to manipulate that score. And we'll get into those. First, I guess it's important that understand, how does what makes that score? So let's just.
Well, can I just bring up one other topic before we move into that?
Sure.
So my credit score may be used to apply for a credit card or a car loan or a mortgage. That isn't the only way it's used, though. Am I correct about that?
So that's something that I really try to drive home to people when I teach this class live. Your credit gets checked all the time. You're probably not even aware of it. I don't know of an automobile insurance company that doesn't check your credit. They don't tell you that because they're doing a soft pull. And the soft pull just yields that number. What is your credit score for the insurance company? So if you've got a high credit score, they assume that you make good decisions. Therefore, you must be a good driver. If you have a low credit score, they assume that you make poor decisions and are probably a poor driver. You get to pay more. And it's not just insurance companies. It's probably when you go for a job interview, they've looked at your credit score and you don't know it.
So
Insurance, the
job interview?
hospital. Oh, job interview. Yeah.
Or job in general.
Yeah.
This is one of the subjects that used to come up quite a bit when I taught the credit class. People didn't understand why an employer would pull their credit score.
Right.
And we used to talk about that. And, automatically people feel a certain way about that. They don't understand, like, I'm a good employee. And you may very well be a good employee. I specifically know someone personally who they're an awesome worker. They're a great employee, but the measurement of your credit score is an indication of your financial health. And health is the word that I think employers are really trying to understand. So they're not just worried about whether or not you're going to steal money out of the register. There are other factors that are affected by your financial health, and that is your physical health is affected by your financial health. So if you are constantly worrying because you're short money or you are in debt or you have creditors calling you, the stress that's created by that in your body now creates sickness. So not only do I have to worry about whether or not you might take something from my business, I have to worry that you're going to call off or be out sick and tax my insurance that I pay for. Yes, you contribute as an employee, but there are all these other factors that could cost me money if you are somebody who is not financially well. And so that's why employers care about your credit score.
Yeah, and that's why you need to care about your credit score too. I mean, that credit score number is it's like a photo ID. It's like an avatar. It's your own digital avatar that lets anybody that has a desire to see that information know stuff about you, or I shouldn't say know stuff about you. They will make assumptions about you based off of that number.
Right.
And again, the way that I've always been told and actually can understand it best is low numbers come from bad decisions. Therefore, that person makes bad decisions. High numbers come from making good decisions. Therefore, that person makes good decisions. There's points in your life where things happen to you.
Right. I was just going to say, what
Yeah.
happens? Someone says, it's not my fault. I lost my job. There were layoffs and I lost my job. I couldn't pay my mortgage.
Right. So there are things like that happen. But just real quickly, it's the way that you reacted to it. If you lost your job and you couldn't pay for your house anymore, you need to reach out to your lender, and try to work something out. If something can't be worked out, maybe you need to think about selling that house. It's how you react to the situation in the end that's going to determine the long-term effect that's going to have on your credit score. Anybody can have a credit score that's bad at a certain period. I certainly did at different times in my life.
As did I.
Yep. I got divorced. That's really devastating to people's credit, but I didn't stay there.
Mm-hmm.
You can't stay there.
Right.
You have to make decisions to fix these problems so that you can recover. You need to recover. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well, how you can do that. Yeah, it's very, very important.
It's affecting so many aspects of your life you don't even realize. And the higher your score is, the more it's going to save you money every step of the way.
Absolutely. So what's that number made out of?
Right.
So there's 5 main things that go. There's a lot of things that go into the number, and it is magical and mystical. But the 5 main things, the 5 things that you can control are what matters most.
That's right. Here's where you get to play the game and win.
Right. So
you control these things.
Here are the 5 big rules. Number 1 is your payment history. You've got to have a good payment history.
Pay on time.
Right. The second biggest one is the amount that you owe. You want to owe as little as possible. There's times in your life where you owe a lot. There's times in your life when you hopefully don't owe anything.
And when you're talking about that, though, that's more related to revolving credit, correct?
Correct. Yes.
So it's going to be your credit cards, for example.
Right.
How much available credit do you have? And how much of that are you using?
Right. We'll get to that. The next thing is the length of time that you've had credit. So if you've had a credit card that you've had for 10 years, it's your longest credit card, no matter how crappy that card might be compared to the new cards that you have, you probably don't want to close that account. You just don't use it, but don't close it because that'll shorten your credit history.
Right.
So you need to have a long credit history. How much new credit do you have? Are you the type of person that's always borrowing money or not? And then lastly, as you said earlier, the type of credit that's used. So the big 3 out of all of those are payment history, the amount you owed, and the type of credit.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you've got a mortgage.
Do you want to say the percentages just for
yeah. So payment history is about 30%. Amount you owed is about 35%. And then the type of credit is about 20%. And the rest of the other 2 are about 10% each. So the big 3, payment history, amount owed, and type of credit are about 80% of your score.
Mm-hmm. So
the amount owed is a big factor. So let's say you've got 5 credit cards and each one of them has a $10,000 limit on it. So you've got $50,000 worth of credit available to you. If you're using $49,000 of that, you're going to have a really low credit score. That's
yes.
really going to have a negative impact on your credit score. If you're using $500 of that, you're going to have a really high credit score because you're managing that available credit very well. You want to try to keep that number below 20%. Below 10% is ideal.
Wow. We used to instruct people never 50% and under.
Yeah, it's changed a lot.
Mhm.
It's 20% and under is where you really need to be.
Wow.
That's the 20% and under is the difference between, say, a 760 credit score and a 680 credit score.
Mhm.
And the difference in an interest rate on a refinance between a 760 and a 680, probably a point and a half.
Wow.
Yeah, it's big. Yeah, on a refinance, it really matters on a refinance.
Wow.
And the type of refinance that you're doing. The other thing that matters is what type of credit is it? Credit card debt, it's the one that you can control the most. So you need to keep that as low as possible. Housing debt, your mortgage, it's going to give you a big boost. Having a mortgage on your credit score lets all three credit bureaus know that you are grounded. You're not going anywhere. You're reliable. You're going to be in your location for a long time. You're easy to find. That reduces your risk factor substantially.
Mhm.
Use
So a real life example of that was my own. I didn't own a house for a very long time. And so I knew how to play the credit game. I was teaching how to play the credit game until I did a home equity loan, got my name on a home equity loan. I could not get my score over 800. I could get it to 780,
right.
but I could not get it over 800 until there was a home equity loan attached to my credit. And then
Right.
suddenly I'm over 800.
Right. If you don't own a home, you can't get a home equity line of credit. You can only use credit cards. Using a home equity line of credit gives you the same control over your money as a credit card does, but it's a completely different kind of debt.
Right.
Again, a credit card, somebody with a credit card that doesn't own a home, we might not ever be able to find you if you owe us money because you live in rent, you can move at the drop of a hat.
Right.
If you own a home and you're using your home equity line of credit to buy furniture instead of using your credit card to buy furniture, your rate's probably going to be much lower. It's not going to have as drastic a negative impact on your credit score because you're investing in your home, you're using your home. Again, very little risk that you're going to disappear on us.
Right.
Because you're grounded.
Right.
Yep. So
it's important.
It is important.
I know the types of credit you have is really only 10% of your score, but it made a huge difference for me.
Well, it's the difference between a 780, and an
over
840, right?
Yeah.
But there's reasons for all of
right.
this. The credit score from a credit card, you're probably, you would have to work really hard, I think, to get an 800 credit score if you lived in rent and only used credit cards. It's just really hard.
Right.
But owning a home, it's about, we started this whole thing off with, it's about building wealth. And this, having great credit is the same as having a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent credit equals the ability to get money.
Absolutely.
And we're going to talk about how important that is in the future.
Yes.
We're getting there, folks. Trust me, we are getting there. But those are the 5 things that make up your credit score. So the things that you can do to manipulate that credit score, particularly when it comes to credit cards, is keep that amount that you owe those credit cards down.
Right.
The other thing that's really important is, when do you pay off your credit card? Some people say, oh, I pay my credit card off every month. Why is my credit score only a 780? I can't get over, I can only get to a 720 probably. Well, if you're using a credit card to buy everything, which my wife and I do that because we get points. Yeah, we get points. Points are wonderful. I love points.
Mm-hmm.
But if your credit card statement comes to you and you see that you owe them $5,000 and you write them a check and you pay them $5,000 or go on the line and pay them the $5,000, after you get that credit card statement, it shows up on your credit report that you owe them $5,000. And if you do that every month, it looks like you're carrying credit card debt, even though you're paying it off. The system doesn't know you're paying it off. So you need to beat the system. So about 3 days before that credit card comes due, you want to go on the internet, see how much you owe them, and pay them off before the statement comes out. So that when the statement hits, it's only got a couple dollars on it, or hopefully a zero balance. And then it looks like you've got this credit card that you've got all of this credit available and you never use. That's going to raise your credit score dramatically.
Right.
You need to beat the system that way.
Right.
Another way people can beat this system, I tell a lot of people to do this. Let's say they're looking to buy or refinance, whatever, and they're a 680 and they need to get to a 720 and they've got 3 credit cards. They've got 3 credit cards. They owe $5,000 each on them and they each have a $6,000 limit, but they've been paying these credit cards on time, faithfully for a year or so. You need to be paying on time in order for this little stunt to work. You're going to call that credit card and you're going to literally say to them, I'm trying to buy a house. I can't get you paid off right now. I need to raise my credit score. Would you consider raising my credit limit to say $12,000 if you owe five? And when they hear that you're looking to buy a house, they're going to do it for a lot of reasons, but there's two main reasons. Number one reason is that lender wants you to buy a house. Because if you buy a house, you spend a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And the odds are that you're going to use that credit card to do it. And that's what they want. So they're going to do that. Well, what that does, if you can get all three of them to raise that credit score, is it, or your debt limit, don't go out and buy new stuff.
Right.
Continue paying them. Don't buy anything with them. But that's going to double the amount that you can borrow, which is probably going to raise your credit score 30, 40, maybe 60 points in a month.
Wow.
That's real important. That's one of the big rules, is to ways to manipulate their game, use their game, use the game.
And this is the thing that lenders typically are really good at, where if you called me as a credit counselor, I don't know the tricks for manipulating a score in that way.
Yeah.
We are trying to create overall good financial health through budgeting, managing your credit, paying off your debt. And that's a little bit different than you literally knowing tricks to raise your credit score in an effort to get you a mortgage.
Right. Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that the discipline, you really need, if you're going to have credit cards with tens of thousands of dollars worth of borrowing ability, you need to know you don't use that. You are using the rules of the game to manipulate the score. Don't fall trap. It is a trap.
Mm-hmm.
Credit card debt is a horrible trap for most people. You just need to discipline yourself.
I will say that you can, after you purchase your home, after you've achieved that financial goal, you can go back and ask them to reduce down your credit limit. They think you're insane, but because as I said, I had bad credit and I did it all wrong before I learned how to do it correctly. But when I decided that I wanted to get out of debt and stop this repeated cycle of credit card debt, I called my credit card company and I said, I want to reduce down my credit limit. And she said, I'm sorry. She said, you mean raise your credit limit? I said, no, I would like to reduce my credit limit to $1,000 because I didn't want to get any more than $1,000 in debt, but I wanted to allow there to be this place where if I had a car emergency or something, I had a place to put that bill. And so they did it for me. They begrudgingly did it for me, but they brought my limit down to, and I'm not telling the general public to go out and do that. I don't think that was the best way, but given the lack of self-discipline that I had at that point in time, that was what worked for me.
Well, so that again, is an example, an excellent example on how that number reflects who you are in reality, as ugly as it can be. You could borrow less, your credit score went down, but it didn't matter at the time. So as I said earlier on, there's times when you want to run that credit score up as high as possible by paying everything off, getting yourself as debt-free as possible, and you're going to buy a house. Once you bought the house, you've used the system to accommodate and achieve the goal you wanted to accommodate. Now you can just go back out, play the game for fun. If you want to buy some furniture on your credit card or take a vacation or whatever it is you're going to do.
Right.
And then now you've learned how to pay it off. Hopefully you'll pay that off again rather quickly. So you don't want to carry a lot of debt.
Right.
But you become disciplined by doing that. And that's how your credit score goes up. I bet your credit card has much higher than $1,000 limit on it now.
It does now.
Yeah. But I bet you don't use it.
Correct.
Unless
I use it in the same way you do. I put everything on it to get the points and pay it off at the end of the month.
Right. So there are a lot of debit cards out there that give you points now. I caution people, just real quickly on this, it's kind of off topic here though. I caution people from using debit cards for anything other than getting money out of your bank's automatic teller machine when there's no other way for you to get money.
Agreed.
And the reason for that is if you're using your debit card and somebody gets that information, they're going to empty your bank account. Most banks will give you your money back, but it can take weeks.
Right.
Whereas if they get your credit card information and they run a whole bunch of stuff up on your credit card, as soon as you see that happen, you're going to let your credit card company know that you did not charge any of those things. And that's their money they're playing with. So of course they're going to take that money back from those vendors and reduce your credit card's bill by whatever that amount was, because it's not your money.
Yeah.
So always in public, I recommend you use a credit card rather than a debit card if you have the ability to do that.
Yeah. I agree. Simply said, you are not afforded the same protections with a debit card as you are with a credit card.
Exactly. So that's a lot about credit.
I do have one other thing I'd like to
Right.
bring up about credit at the moment.
Sure.
And that is the big problem that many borrowers have is medical bills on their credit report.
Right.
And as a mortgage lender, this is one of the biggest concerns they have, and you maybe have or had in the past when they go to buy a home. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Right. So there was a law passed a couple years ago that medical bills cannot appear on your credit report or be held against you on your credit report. But doctors and hospitals want to get paid, so they found a way around it. And the consumer needs to be aware of that. If you don't pay your medical bill directly to the hospital or the doctor usually within 30 days, they're going to right away give it to a collection agency. And that collection agency can appear on your credit report, and we will hold that against you. So what people need to do is when they have a medical bill, immediately set up a payment program with that doctor's office, hospital, dentist, whoever it is, right away. And if you think you can afford $50 a month, you tell them you can afford $10 a month. Because if you tell them $10 a month, they're going to say $100 a month. And you can negotiate this back and forth until you get it to that $50 that you can afford. Never start at what you can afford when you're negotiating, particularly with anybody in the medical field, because they want to get all the money right away. Rightfully so. They did all the work. They want the money. You want to pay these people. Your life might depend on it literally one day. But you can negotiate that, and you need to pay them directly, and you need to pay them on time directly, because as soon as you get to the 30th day of delinquency, they will report it to a collection agency.
So the collection agency can still report to the credit reporting bureau, and so you ultimately get the same consequence because now it's not showing on your credit report as a medical bill.
Now it's just a uncollected debt.
So you really, and I will tell you, in my history of helping people with their debt, I see people with $75 bills that are medical bills that are showing on their credit report. And, people say to me, well, I didn't have $75. And I'd say, well, do you have 10? Because if you start paying it, usually they won't report it. So they just want to know that you're going to pay it down. But I said that $75 bill that's showing as a collection or as a medical bill on your credit report is costing you a lot more than $75.
Right. Yeah, it's brutal. So yeah, you definitely, and this comes to any credit, whether it's an old credit card or an old utility bill, cable bills, run into that a lot. People move and the cable company didn't turn off the cable when they were supposed to, and I'm not paying that bill because the heck with those guys. Yeah, well, these guys are going to cost you a lot of money. You're far better off on your credit report, right where the bad debt is. There's a phone number. They have to provide a phone number.
Right.
You're going to call that phone number. You're probably going to be on hold an hour. You be prepared. But they negotiated away. It's amazing how, let's say you had an old cable bill that was $380. You call old cable company and say, hey, I see this is on here. I want it off of there. If I give you $200, will you remove that? They're so happy they have nothing now.
Right.
You give them $200, they'll probably remove it or at least mark it paid. They'll mark it paid, not as agreed. Yeah. That's okay. It's still paid.
Paid less than full balance.
Right. Yeah. Whatever. Yeah. But at least it's paid. That lets the creditors that are looking at you now know, All right, they didn't do exactly what they were supposed to do, but they didn't run and hide. They dealt with it.
Right.
That's really what we want. We want to see people that are willing to be honest. We're lending you money. We want to make sure that you're worthy.
And so kind of in the same vein, people who declare bankruptcy, how do
Mhm.
you feel about that as a lender when you're looking at a credit report?
So, from a mortgage standpoint, you can't borrow until 3 years after a bankruptcy is resolved. So you might file for bankruptcy in year one, but that bankruptcy isn't
Discharged?
thank you, discharged until the third year. That's when the clock starts ticking. So you got to wait 3 years.
Okay.
After 3 years, we will look at you, but we're going to look at you very, very hard. So while that 3-year period is happening, you want to do everything that you can to reestablish your credit in a positive way this time. Doesn't matter why you went bankrupt. Most bankruptcies are caused because of medical bills.
Right.
It's horrible. It's the truth. It's the way it is. But from the hard facts of the way that the rules are for lending, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. All we want to see is from the point that you were absolved of that debt, did you learn from that? And are you trying to be as careful as you can be with money? Or are you going down the same path again?
Right.
So if it's a medical thing, we're going to see that. And if everything was paid anyway during that medical thing, you're probably going to get a much kinder, gentler path than if you just filed bankruptcy because you didn't feel like paying for any of the bills anymore. You got too far in over your skis, as they say, and now you're doing it again. Shortly after your bankruptcy, you're going to get credit card offers. You're going to get car loan offers. You're probably going to need a car, and you want to get a credit card again and start reestablishing. It's how you go about it. If you bought a reasonable car with a reasonable car payment and you paid it on time, that's great. If you bought a unreasonable car and you paid your payments in 30 days here, 60 days here, we're not going to, you're not going to make it.
What do you find as a lender is the number one problem that causes people not to have good credit scores? When people come to you that you turn away because they can't possibly buy because their credit score is a 510, for example, those folks, when they come to you, what do you see is the problem generally?
90% of the time, it's an unwillingness to be responsible for their own actions. I see people with big medical bills that they find a way to get paid off. There's a lot of programs out there if you reach out for help when it comes to those kind of things, and you need to do that. If that's your situation, you need to do that. It needs to be done. That's not the broadest. Most of the people that I talk to have poor credit. They don't pay their credit card bills on time. They've stiffed 2 or 3 phone companies. First they were with Verizon, then they were with AT&T, and now they're with T-Mobile, and next they'll be with Boost, and then they won't have a phone. Those kind of things. They're not paying for the things that you just need to pay for.
What if they say to you, well, my problem really is I just don't make enough money?
Well, then the problem is you're spending too much money. Everybody, that's a really hard to be nice about kind of a thing, but it's why I hope folks are listening to these podcasts and they learn this stuff. You need to live within your means. I said several times over the last few podcasts, I've been rich and I've been poor.
Mm-hmm.
Rich is better. There's no doubt about that. But poor is not terrible either. It's a mindset. When I was working in the back of a department store unloading trucks, and I was making very little money, and my wife was working on a farm and she was making very little money. We lived a very simple little life. We both got paid every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks, we would walk to a restaurant that was near our house. We would split a hamburger and French fries. I would have a shot of tequila and she would have a beer. And that was our night out for those 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
That came to $27, including a tip. I will never forget that. 2 or 3 weeks ago, we were in that area of town and we stopped in. That bartender still remembered us.
That's
That was
great.
so cool. You need to live within your means. I was driving a 17-year-old Pontiac.
Right.
It was the best car that I could afford at the time. This was right before we got married.
Were you in
Yeah.
debt?
We had very little debt because we had very little money. So we just didn't borrow money. We had credit card availability, but we didn't use it because we didn't want to have to pay it.
I think this is where my theory, after being a credit counselor and credit educator, came from. Money problems don't have anything to do with money, or very little to do with money. It's really about a mindset.
Mm.
And generations ago, you didn't buy things on credit. You bought things when you had the money. I remember vividly my father wanted a new ladder and it was $75. And he didn't have $75. This was the 80s. And so he saved $5 a week. He had his envelope in his desk, ladder written on the outside. And every week when he got paid, he put $5 in there till there was $75. Then you bought the ladder.
Right.
And that is how people did it before.
Yeah.
And they thought very differently about what they consumed. And so therefore their spending was completely different. Now there is a sense of, I deserve this, even if I don't have the money to pay for it. And then credit is so available that I can get myself in some trouble accommodating my sense of entitlement. That's one thing. There are many other reasons why people spend money they don't have. But I think that you just gave a great example, and I did the same. I was 32 years old and decided that I was going to change careers. I took basically a 50% pay cut and moved to a place where it cost me significantly more to live. And when I did that, I knew that was coming. I had made that decision, and I spent 4 months prior to moving literally living off of what was going to be my new salary so that I could adjust before the reality hit. But I did that, and I never, even in the 4 years I spent living where I had moved to, reclaimed that same level of income. And I got in zero debt. I got a graduate degree. I took vacations, and I had the best social life I ever had. And I was living at significantly less than what I had been. So it is a mindset, but you do have to think differently and behave differently when you earn less. Doesn't mean you can't do it. You just have to think and behave differently.
Exactly. I've heard this saying several times in my life. I had more money when I was working in a grocery store as a teenager than I have today. And the reason for that is because when you were a teenager working in a grocery store, you didn't have credit cards.
Right.
You probably didn't have a car loan. You probably had a bicycle that you rode to work. And when you cashed your check, that was your money. Now you get up in the morning and you go to work and you've got all this debt. You're not working for yourself anymore. You're working for every one of those creditors.
Right.
Every one of those creditors owns you.
Right.
So the best way to be a free person is to not have any debt if you can get away from all debt. That's the best way to live. It's hard. It requires discipline.
Right.
It requires a wait for it mentality instead of a I'll get it now.
Yeah. Instant
Buy now, pay
gratification.
later.
Yeah.
That's a terrible way to live your life.
My husband says it best. If you can make $1 million a year, but if you spend $1,001,001, you're still in debt.
Exactly.
And so it really doesn't matter how much money you earn. I hear you. Right now, there's people who are going to respond to this podcast with, I make minimum wage. I can't. And that's absolutely true. And so when you make minimum wage, especially in the state of Pennsylvania, which is still $7 an hour, you need to change jobs for sure because most places pay more than that. But you have to now live with other people because you can't. Truthfully, you couldn't afford to have a place of your own at $7 an hour unless someone is giving you accommodation. But you have to live a completely different lifestyle than somebody who's earning $120,000 a year.
You have to sacrifice to get ahead.
Correct.
It's difficult. I wouldn't say it the way that I say it if I didn't do it myself. We had to sacrifice to get where we are.
Right.
Nobody handed any of us anything.
Right.
We had to work for it. I'm trying to share the knowledge that I got through those hard lessons so that other people don't have those hard lessons. So definitely, Reduce your credit card debt as soon as possible.
Right.
Reduce it to zero if it's at all possible. Don't cancel your credit cards
Right.
because that'll defeat the purpose. You want to have the availability without the need to use it.
Right.
There should be there for emergencies. But once you've got that paid off, then start saving money. And we're going to do a whole podcast, I think, on how to save one of these days so that you don't have to rely on credit cards in the event that you have an emergency. So you're more prepared.
Right.
But hopefully there was enough said there where people understand, learn the rules to the game. We listened to this several times if you want to. Those are the rules to the game.
Mm-hmm.
Use that to manipulate your score, get it where it needs to be when you're trying to accommodate, when you're trying to achieve a goal. And then the rest of the time, you can play for fun.
And we may have shared a lot of information that prompted a lot of questions. Please give us your questions. We'd be happy to answer them in a future podcast.
Absolutely. Until then, I'm Ed Marko.
And I am Kimberly Von Dohren.
You have been listening to Brick by Brick. Be sure and subscribe, post questions for future episodes, or comment. This is a Super Squirrel production, Super Squirrel Studios, Stony Creek Mills, Pennsylvania.